So
Okay.
all women in
Excellent.
Women Auxiliary, they have all the information.
So about 8 people texted me that they're at other emergency meetings for Israel. So they asked me to record it. You're all now being recorded, so be careful what you say. I'd like to begin. Any questions before we begin the evening about study matter, even anything not about the study matter? Okay.
Well, one thing that Ahua was saying about Arik, what is that? Is that going to be publicized? How do we know what time and everything tomorrow? Or
In the afternoon.
Yeah, but has it
okay.
been publicized? I'll see if Ahuva can send me the email with the exact name and all the information. I'll send out an email tonight, God willing.
Okay.
All right. So let's begin. So tonight we're a lot of people literally were asking me, you know, what's the history of Gaza? You know, what's the political history? What's the halachic history? So I decided, oh my gosh, I thought I knew a lot about Gaza, but one of the great things about being a rabbi and being asked to teach subject matters, like I always kick it up a notch. Sevra, wait until you see the history of Gaza. So first, I wanted to start with some good news or amazing news for us. So actually, instead of me reading, who would like to read?
I can read.
Bavakasha.
Okay, I will start. One.
Wait. Let me tell you what this is. This is a WhatsApp that my sister sent me through my other sister that somebody else sent her. Okay.
Okay. So it says, wow, Nahama. On Tuesday morning, I returned to Israel from Tokyo via Bangkok. Before boarding the plane from Bangkok to Israel, the terminal was full of young backpackers who wanted to return to Israel to the reserves. Upon boarding, they announced that all those who still do not have a seat will wait and try to get everyone on the plane. There were dozens of young people there who wanted to go back to enlist. El Al USA took all the available seats on the plane and filled up to the last seat on the plane. I felt sorry for those who could not go up due to lack of space. Then, to my surprise, after they finished filling the plane, the El Al people took more than 20 young women and put them on the plane and put them in the crew's folding chairs. And after that, the captain gave permission and more than 10 young men to sit on the floor in the kitchens and near the doors of the plane were put on the flight. Sounds like a bus. In my entire life, I have never seen a flight where dozens of people are sitting on the floor. During their entire flight, they slept on the floor wherever possible, including near the cockpit, on the floor in the business class, and in every corner of the plane. The pictures speak for itself and illustrate a little of what was on the special, very special flight. During the flight, I saw the captain walking around the plane, making sure the crew was taking care of all these wonderful young people. Thanks to the wonderful team of El Al, pilots and flight attendants, Israel for the extraordinary gesture. Thanks, Israel, for the extraordinary gesture. Kudos to the CEO of El Al for having such employees. I have to admit that they warmed my heart, to say the least. Original post by
Uri
Schechter.
Uri Schechter, and post by, yeah.
So real quickly, so I'm not sure if you're aware, the pictures are no longer available because one, they broke every international law. They broke the law. You're not allowed to do things like that. You're not allowed to have people not in seatbelts. And the whole idea is that they did what we have to do. These You know, in Israel, I'll never forget, it happened, the first time it happened was in 73, where a convicted felon, he was a felon, he did some bad things. In the day after Yom Kippur War started, he petitioned the Supreme Court that just because he was a convicted felon, they could not deny him the right to fight for the state of Israel. And they agreed. And he went to his unit and he was killed in Sinai with his unit. So, you know,
And we
what
had
else
a group, Robert, we had a group that they were like the Black Panthers. That's what it was. It was a group that was called the Black Panthers in Israel at that time, and they were in jail and they were fighting to get out, and they finally got them. They went to fight.
So this is going around. Actually, my nephew who's there took a picture of this. So these guys are coming, and you know, there's no shampoo, hygiene issues. So everyone's shaving their head really close. So it was a cute picture. But here's my favorite one. This is a guy who came back from India, and he's been growing his hair long. And it's not recommended for a number of reasons, like in case you need a gas mask or whatever. So they shaved his head. But the funny part was the guy who shaved him left his payas. You see? So as a joke, and he sent the picture home to his parents that you can see the payas over here on the right. So it was a good joke. Another, I wanted to start this evening with some positive things. Hundreds of Germans formed a human shield to protect the synagogue in the German city of Berlin in the neighborhood known as Frankenhofe, to symbolically protect it during a day that Hamas had called for a day of jihad. On the gates, these protective gates, the German non-Jews brought photos of the kidnapped children and adults, including, as we all know now, a 6-month-old baby. So the world is a disgusting, horrible place, but there's still some amazing good things happening. That being said, let's get to the origin of Gaza. So we're going to talk about Jewish history in Gaza. The earliest non-biblical reference to Gaza is the War Chronicles of Pharaoh Thutmose III, 1500 BCE. And 1500 BCE is approximately 300 years before Moses, our Moses, and the Exodus story. So the history of Gaza is it's a very ancient community. This also, by the way, is this is known as the Telemarna letters of Pharaoh Seti, and this is 1300 BCE, and I think it's somewhere in this stele. These are called steles. It mentions the community of Gaza. Not necessarily the Jewish community, but just that there was already towns and villages in Gaza. And that brings us to this week's Torah portion. Vayhi gvul haknani mitzion ba'acha gerara ad Aza ba'acha Sodoma va'amor va'adma utzvoim ad Lasha. So the whole idea is that here in this week's Torah portion, we're going to be talking about in the Canaanite territory, extended from Sidon, which is in Lebanon, as far as Gerara, near Gaza, and as far as Sodom and Gomorrah, Adma and Tzvoim, near Lasha. By the way, this is, part of the landscape immediately adjacent to the area of Gaza, and it's known as it's a natural occurring foundation, but it's considered one of the interesting topographical things that tourists go to see. It's called the Wall of Gaza. It's a naturally occurring phenomena, but it's called the Wall of Gaza, Chomat Gaza, but I think they changed the name because of the inference. Another thing is just to make sure that you can understand this is a map. And here you can see ancient Canaan. This road here is called Via Mare, which is the way of the ocean. This red one is called Via del Rey, which means this is the king's path. This is where the noblemen and the rich travel. And this was the easiest path. And it was, you can see this is Gaza. This whole area is ancient Gaza. And in the Torah in Genesis 26, and there was a famine in the land of Israel, besides the first famine that was in the time of Abraham, and Yitzchak went to Avimelech, king of the Plishtim, to Gerar. And you can see Gerar is almost exactly where Nachal Oz is today. And then further on, 5 verses later, Vayeshev Yitzchak b'Gerar. And Yitzchak lived in Gaza. He lived in the community of Gaza. There was already an established king. His name was Avimelech, and we're going to learn about him in a moment. He had an army, and the relationship was we were allowed to go in. Later, there was a situation with Rebecca, with Rivka. Was she, kidnapped or whatever? There's going to be a lot of rabbis drawing attention to that. I'm not going to go that way. In chapter 26, I'm just going to skip to the English again to show you that in the Bible, we have references to Gaza. And Yitzchak dug wells of Abraham, his father. Abraham dug many wells of water, which had been dug in the days of Abraham, his father. For the Plishtim, those were the Philistines, had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. He called their names after the names which his father had called them. Yitzchak's servants dug a well in the valley. That's called the Valley of Esek, which is, you could go there today. It's and it leads from Nachal Oz all the way to the water, to the Mediterranean. And there Yitzchak found a wellspring of water. And the herdmen of Gerar, that's the city in Gaza, they fought with Yitzchak's herdmen. They said, the water is ours. So he called the well Esek, because that means conflict, because they fought with one another. Then he dug another well, and they fought over that one, and he called it Sitna, because Sitna comes from the Hebrew word which means hatred, because they hated us over the water. And the Lord appeared to him, and then he dug a third well, kept on going further and further away, Rehovot. And Rehovot, we all know, is a Jewish city. It's approximately 16 miles north of Gaza, and the Weizmann Institute of Technology has its home in Rehovot. In the last paragraph from Genesis chapter 26, the Lord appeared to Yitzchak at night and said to him, I am the God of Abraham your father, fear not, for I am with you. And I will bless you, and I will multiply your seed as my servant Abraham. And he built there an altar. Yitzchak built an altar there in Gaza. And he called upon the name of the Lord, and he pitched his tent there. And there Yitzchak's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech, who's the king of the Gazans, went to him from Gerar, and he said, with Achuzah, his friend, and Fichol, his captain of the army. And Yitzchak said to him, why do you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you? So this is very almost prophetic, that no matter what we did, no matter how much it belonged to Abraham, and they said, no, it's ours. And they kept on taking our land away from us, taking our land. I'm reading you the biblical story. This is not modern day politics. And then when it suited their fancy, they wanted to make peace with us. And Yitzchak says to him, why are you trying to make peace with me when you hate me? I'm literally, it's right there in the Hebrew. Okay? So it's very interesting that the Torah, even if people don't believe the Torah's divine origin, even if you say that the Torah is written throughout Jewish history approximately 2,600 years ago, okay, so that means that 2,600 years ago, this is still prophetic, that they are trying to take our land and claim that our land isn't ours, but more importantly, Yitzchak knew they hated us, even though we did nothing wrong. So let's continue with studying some more places in the Torah where Gaza is a very important biblical reference. So this is just quotations about when the people of Israel were preparing to enter into the land of Israel, and Moses is outlining areas specific to Israel. So too with the Avim, these were people that dwelt in the villages in the vicinity of Gaza. So you just got to remember villages. That means when the time of Moses and Joshua, there were villages, okay, in Gaza. Some of them, according to this, we don't know exactly where Kaftor is, but it's a Crete. They were Phoenicians. So, but they were wiped out, and these people came and settled in their place. It means it's an area of great warring. First, there were the people of the Kaftorim, and then they were slaughtered, and this other people came in their place. Sounds familiar. Set out across the Wadi Arnon and see, I give you the power of Sichon, the Amorite king of Bashan, and his land. Begin the occupation, engage him in battle. So the whole idea is that you see here that Moses is telling Joshua that when you enter into the land, you're going to have to go to Gaza and fight them because they're a vicious nation. Okay. Wadi Arnon actually is today the natural border. It's about half a mile. Well, how much is a kilometer? 0.6. So it is about 1.2 miles from the border fence is Wadi Arnon. The day I begin to, and this is again, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses is just continue. This day I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven, so that they shall tremble and quake because of you, whomever they hear you mention. This is what Moses says when you're going to go attack and clear out the area of Gaza, because you're going to see why, who's going to inherit that land, that you have to do what? You got to make them quake and tremble. So even if you don't consider this a prophetic doctrine, what is interesting is that 3,000 years ago in the Torah, we knew that that Gaza was a place of extensive battle, hatred towards us, and a lot of bad things. So let's continue to see what it was like in the Bible. Have I not commanded thee? From Joshua, remember, Moses dies and Joshua brings us into the land of Israel. And this is what we had to do when we enter. Chazak v'ametz, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither shall you be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with thee wherever you goeth. So the idea is that this is, by the way, a lot of soldiers, there's a number of songs, and many of them have the same concept, Chazak v'ametz, be strong and have good courage. So I wanted to show you again in the book of Joshua, here in chapter 13, verse 3, and then again in 15, verse 47. And if you look in the Hebrew and the English, I put in red where there are references in the Torah that Gaza appears in the Torah approximately 3,000 years ago. From Shihor, which is close to Egypt, to the territory of Ekron on the north, are counted Canaanite, namely, those are the 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazites, people from Gaza, the Ashdodites, the Ashkelonites, the Gitites, and the Ekronites, and those of the Avim. So it's interesting that the Torah acknowledges that Ashdod and Ashkelon are now part of our political land of Israel. But here you see that we were supposed to empower to take it from the inhabitants of Gaza. And then further, in verse 13, chapter 13, verse 4, on the south, further, all the Canaanite country from Me'arah of the Sidonim to Aphek and the Amorite border. These are actually what we would consider now the political borders of Gaza that we are now encamped upon. And that includes, if you notice, those close to Egypt in this verse over here. This is literally the border that Egypt now has. There's a Wadi bed there too, and it's not called Wadi El Arish. I made a mistake and I won't said that. El Arish is about 40 miles further south. And this is what Hashem continues in verse 4. I myself will dispossess those nations of the Israelites. You have only to apportion their lands by lot among Israel, as I have commanded you. And then in the description later on in chapter 15, Ashdod, its dependencies, and its villages, Gaza, all these lands are supposed to be ours according to the Torah. Its dependencies and its villages, all the way to the Wadi of Egypt and the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. So here in the English, they called it Nachal Mitzrayim, but in other places, it's also called Nachal Arava. Not Nachal Arava, that's wrong. Wadi Geese, I think. But I'm sorry, I couldn't find it as much as I tried looking in my Atlas Carta, which is a biblical book of maps. Okay, so here you can see the ancient tribal lands of Israel. And as remember that this tribe, Manasseh and Gad, and Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh, they requested to be on the east side of the Jordan, and they only had to do is cross the Jordan and fight with us for this land. And you can see that each one of the 12 tribes has a very specific area. And what I did here in red is this is currently political Gaza. If you look closely, here's Gaza, here's Gerar, here's Gat. Does anyone know, Uva, don't yell it out, who is the famous person from Gat? Goliath. Here's Ashdod, here's Ashkelon. So you can see in the biblical map that Judah, the tribe of Judah, was biblically granted the land of Gaza. And Judah, and this is from Judges chapter 1, verse 18, and Judah captured Gaza and its territory, Ashkelon and its territory, Ekron and its territory. So you see that biblically, this area is definitively supposed to be Jewish. Now, don't get me wrong. I personally, the way things are, it's not the rabbi speaking; it's Elliot speaking. I don't want to repossess. I don't want to take Gaza over again. Let me stop. In fact, this is so important. I want to stop the video. So in 1977, when Menachem Begin made peace with Egypt, Menachem Begin offered Assad Gaza. And does anyone know what Assad said? No, thank you. I don't want them. They're animals. Also,
the PLO was very active.
Even in 1977, the Muslim Brotherhood had been established. Muslim Brotherhood had been a thorn in Egypt leadership going back to the 50s, the 1950s. So regardless, we know for a fact that even Assad did not want Gaza. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
Can we consider them Amalek?
By their actions and deeds, absolutely. Now you should know that about 12 years ago, I think it was Haaretz, did an amazing, I don't love Haaretz, it's not a secret, but I will tell you, they did do a very interesting article on that. About 60% of the Palestinians definitively have Jewish blood. Definitively. They also have anywhere from, depending on what community they're from, anywhere from 5 to 20% European blood. That means Christian Crusaders. So I don't think they're Amalek. I think Hamas is spiritually Amalek. What they did, like I mentioned, Chevra, I want to warn you. In fact, this is so important, I'm going to stop the share again. The Israeli consulate sent out an email today, and I'm warning you, do not watch the videos. They do not have sufficient warning. What they showed was beyond inhuman. And no one should call Hamas animals. They're not. Animals never do the things, would never do the things that Hamas did. They're not animals. They're not inhumane. They're subhuman. It's a big difference. And I'm telling you, I'm warning you now, the Israeli consulate should not have sent out that email with those links without a major warning, because you watch those things and you cannot unsee it. It's the things that give people nightmares for years. Do not trust me. We all read about how bad it was. You don't have to see it. The reason why they sent it out is because they wanted to validate and prove that we weren't exaggerating. So now that you know the Jewish people don't exaggerate, that means that you don't have to watch those videos.
Rabbi, did they send it to anyone else besides the Jews? Because we know what happened.
I don't know.
Rabbi, you asked me before, know who might know somebody there? Melanie from Israel Bonds, she might have a connection.
I already sent Gabriel Beredas, who's a real tzaddik. I sent him a message to call me. I didn't want to even put it in writing.
Rabbi, they did send it, they did publish it to others besides, they put it out there, and you can see on the side the comments from the people defending or attacking the IDF and defending the terrorists, denouncing it, saying this is made up, the voice is fake. And so yeah, they did publish it.
Yeah, well, I'm asking you for your own mental health not to watch it. Okay. this is also very famous from Samson. Samson, Shimshon in Hebrew. He went to Gaza, saw there a harlot, and went into her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Shimshon has come here, Samson. And they surrounded him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him. Does this sound familiar? Let me read it again. And they surrounded him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all that night, saying, in the morning, this is terrorists. They outnumbered him, right? And Shimshon lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and went away with them, and bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up the top of the hill that is before Hebron. So he, instead of acting in self-defense and killing them, he just destroyed their front door. So that the idea was, one of the commentaries says that they would be more worried about marauders and so they would stop harassing innocent people, and they would have to redouble their efforts to keep themselves safe. When people, how should you act to terrorism? Well, sometimes you have to be, the Hebrew word is achzari, which means without compassion. Okay, so I wanted to read real quickly from Jeremiah, the book of Yirmiyahu. This is chapter 47. And you know what, real quickly, it's just, the whole point is that even in the book of Yirmiyahu, there's numerous calls and references to Gaza. The word of the Lord came into Yirmiyahu, the Jeremiah the prophet, against the Plishtim before Paro, who smote Gaza. Okay, there's it again. And then it's all about the war for Gaza between Mitzrayim and Sidon. And here again, down here, and baldness has come upon Gaza. Gaza is the Hebrew word for Gaza. And Ashkelon is cut off. It talks about the geopoliticals of it, about the valley. And then in the last verse, how can it be quiet, seeing the Lord has given it a charge against Ashkelon, against the seashore, that he has appointed it? Which means, how could we not respond to the violence? How could we? That's what Yirmiyahu is saying. Here is an important map that gives you an idea why the history of Gaza has been so geopolitically charged. And we're talking about 1,500 years ago till today. It was strategically located on the Via Maris, at the shortest route from ancient Egypt to Mesopotamia. So you can see here, this is the Heliopolis is the actual ancient capital of Egypt, as is Tanis. That was more like the religious capital of ancient Egypt. And then if you can see, you follow along this route. And by the way, for those of us who remember, prior to 1977, there was a community here called Yamit, a Jewish community of 5,000 people that was forcibly removed by us as part of the peace agreement. And it was right here. It was called, how do you say sea in Hebrew? Yam. This is Yam HaTichon, the Mediterranean Sea. And this town was called Yamit. And it was beautiful. And after we gave it up, what do you think they did with it? You think they brought in, people to live there? No, they bulldozed it. So regardless, you can see why Gaza is so important, because it is the trade route called Via Mare. And it goes all the way up. And it also, you can cut it. This is the Jezreel Valley. So you don't have to climb. This is all mountains. You don't have to climb 1,700 feet up. And then you could just cut across this valley. And then on the valley of where this is south of the Golan, another valley. And then you go right into Mesopotamia. And you can see why these towns, Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Jaffa, all the way up to Sidon, were important. Next, Gaza was captured by Alexander the Great in 324 BCE. Why did he capture it? Because he knew that it controlled one of the major routes between Africa, Asia, and Europe. And this is actually a Greek rendering of the battle for Gaza. Gaza was later conquered by the Romans and gifted by Octavian, he was the Caesar at the time, to Herod the Great in 30 BCE. And this is a picture of Herod and I forgot who was in the middle, but this is Octavian, this is Herod, and he's ceding him control of Gaza in the year 30. So again, there you have it's not our history, it's Roman history, that the Jews were in charge of Gaza. King David with a lyre was found in ancient Gaza. This was in 1966. A non-Jewish archaeologist found a building, and they didn't know what it was, and they called it a church because it was obviously it had seats in it, and it was obviously a place of prayer. Within the church was a mosaic floor described as depicting a figure of a female saint playing the harp and charming wild animals. That's how they described it in this journal called Orientalia. The only thing was they weren't, either it was politically motivated or they just weren't very smart, because the professors could not explain why there are no references to Jesus or iconic representations of the cross, a standard of that time. So that means when this was, when this religious building was built, you know, and if it was supposed to be a church, I think it's from the year 500, not BCE, only 1500 years ago. They couldn't understand why there were no crosses. And the answer is, look what, you can all see this up here. This is not, you don't need to understand ancient font. Dalid, Vav, Yud, Dalid. It's one of the classic ways that you spell David. And what was King David known for? Playing a harp. And then guess what they found out after they finished cleaning the area? He wasn't, whoever's playing the harp was not trying to play to animals. They were two lions, because the Lion of Judah, King David, that was his symbol. Until today, the symbol of Jerusalem is the lion. In 67, when Israel regained control, it was found that the face of David and other Hebrew words had been vandalized, right? Because if this was a man playing the lyre, it would just validate it. And again, proof that Gaza was in antiquity was definitively Jewish. And these are just the lions. It's actually a mother lion and her cub suckling. It was actually the largest synagogue found to date. And it was facing northeast towards Jerusalem. That's another thing. There was a niche for a Torah ark and a podium, which we would call a bima, for Torah readings according to custom. The floor of the synagogue had been paved with beautiful mosaics, such as this one. And the southernmost aisle at the right of the plan was a well-preserved mosaic with the popular pattern of vines forming circles or medallions that contained animal biblical figures. And again, we see the same thing in other ancient synagogues in places like Sipori, in Dan, in the Golan Heights, in Gamla, almost the same exact artisanship. An inscription was found here in Gaza at this ancient synagogue, again, proving that it's ours. And what did the inscription say? We, Menachem and Yehoshua, sons of the late Yishai, Jesse, wood traders, as a sign of respect for our most holy place, donated this mosaic. So, you know, when you walk into shul and everything's got donated by written underneath it, it's actually was a very ancient custom that donors had their names placed on something. And again, this just validates that ancient Gaza had the largest synagogue in Byzantium. So here it's before I actually study this, I'm about to teach you this because it's a historical fact, but you need to, the reason why I'm teaching it to you is because you have to read between the lines. Now that you understand, read between the lines. So in 1648, there was a false messiah. His name was Shabtai Tzvi, and he completely screwed up Jewish world because it was right after the Chmielnicki pogrom that killed about 350,000 Jews. And Jews, both in Europe and in the Sephardi world, thought that the world was coming to an end. And a messianic fervor started with this false Messiah. He claimed that he was the Messiah, and he had not tens of thousands, he had hundreds of thousands of people who were fooled by this guy. And it was a horrible cult. It was a classic cult. In fact, Shabtai Tzvi used to do things that we now know that a lot of cult leaders do to young women, etc., etc. It was a real cult. His name was Shabtai Tzvi. So why am I teaching it to you? Because this guy was his prophet, and his name was Natan of Gaza, or Natan Ha'azati. And the whole idea is, I'll read it to you. He was a religious leader born in Jerusalem in 1644. After his marriage in 1663, he moved to the Jewish community of Gaza. He became famous as the prophet of the false Messiah, Shabtai Tzvi. He was a gifted orator, preacher, and intellectual. He was ordained and soon was able to gather a significant following in the communities of Gaza. After his initiation into the study of Kabbalah, he claimed visionary influences and spiritual enlightenment in which he saw Shabtai Tzvi revealed as the Mashiach. Shabtai Tzvi's rapid rise in the known Jewish world as a potential and later proven false Messiah is accredited to the gifted skills of his lieutenant, Natan of Gaza. Note, in the 1600s, the Jewish community in Gaza was very well established. That's why I'm teaching it to you. Not because Shabtai Tzvi and his being a false Messiah and that he had a cult and he did crazy, sick, and demented things. But the Jewish community of Gaza was significant even in the 1600s. So I'm showing you increments of 200, 300, and 400 years that there have been a continuous Jewish presence in Gaza up until 1948. So let's continue. Again, 1922, this is a certificate of Palestinian citizenship. A British citizen, it's a document from 1922 acknowledging Jewish citizens lived in Gaza. So if you look right here, the guy's name was Moshe Yosef Arbas, and he was 28 years old in 1922. His religion is Jew. He's 5 feet tall, which is 5'10". He's very tall. What's his place of birth? Gaza. Okay, a Jew, all right, in the late 1800s. Because if he was 28 years old in 1922, that means he was born in 1892 in Gaza. That's right.
Palestinian, Rabbi.
What?
And he's a Palestinian.
Right. Well, they called them Palestinians because it wasn't the land. But the whole point is that this is proof that Jews lived large communities. You think his father wasn't there when he was born? You don't think? What I'm trying to say is, you think his mother ran away to Gaza to give birth? My whole point is that there were large communities in 1892, and this is the proof. In the early 1900s, they already had destroyed a lot of the kibbutzim. You know, the riots in 1928, the riots in 1936. So in 1947, after the Shoah, the rebuilding of the Jewish community of Kfar Doron on barren land that had been bought from the Ottoman Empire. And that's what the emphasis is. That although we were going to lose it in 1948, this property was lost to our enemies. But the whole point was that we bought it from the Ottomans and we built a community there that we lost. Now, let's talk about a little bit of Jewish mysticism. So many of you are familiar with hidden codes of the Torah. So in the late 1900s, a professor at Weizmann Institute of Technology, he was a secular, Jew who came from the former Soviet Union, and he devised a methodology that he was constantly being inundated with invitations for Shabbat and for holidays, and he was a secular Jew. And finally, someone said to him, well, why don't you believe? Because I'm a scientist. He goes, no, you're not. Because if you're a scientist, then you would have examined the opposing thought instead of just taking the one side. The Torah is written by man. So he developed this whole thing where he encoded the entire Torah onto a program. And then you start doing research into if the Torah is random or written through 5 different periods or 4 different periods of time, then the frequency of certain words and the frequency of certain letters would be apparent in patterns. So for example, if someone uses the word yo dude, then you know that that person's living in the in the 21st century. But if a person says something like madam, and you know he's living in the early in the 1950s. So based on this idea, he wanted to see if he can find patterns of words and letters. And instead, it opened up an amazing validation of a mystical technique where we find words that are matching and words that are related, hidden in the Torah. And what they would do is they would decide on equal letter distancing, ELD or ELS, spacing, equal letter spacing. They would say, what happens if we count every 100 letter? What does it spell out? And that's what I'm about to show you, that there are different ways of doing this. And here you see that we have the word Gaza and Hasamal. In Jewish mysticism, Samael is the angel of destruction. And you can see here that Aza, Ayin Zayin He, and Hasamael actually, intersect. The angel of destruction and Gaza intersect. That means there's a spiritual relationship between destruction and the empowerment of the people of Gaza. In this one, you see Samael, Hamas, male goat, and Persia. So what is Persia? In Hebrew is Paras. Rabbi, what do we care about Persia? Because Persia is not called Persia today. Everyone yell it out. Persia is today called Iran.
Iran.
Right? So here you have Paras. Here you have Samael. Here you have Seir Izim, and Paras. So why? So the goat on Yom Kippur that is slaughtered. Right. The Seir Izim, the male goat on Yom Kippur on the Day of Judgment that is slaughtered. Okay. So we can see some very interesting words that, by the way, this is the frequency. This is the chapter and verse, but here, and these are the frequency, how many letters they're counting between the known distancing. Here you can see again, the same exact thing. In Gaza, the angel of destruction, Hamas, to deliver, Latate, into the hands of the Emorites, who Hashmidenu, that destroy us, Vayishava, that God swore that I would not cross the Jordan. So you see all these things that remarkably intersect at the appropriate equal distance of lettering. Again, just the same thing. Gaza. Oh, everyone knows who Ismail Haniyeh is. He is the head of
Hamas.
And
he's
for
the one that
some,
was sick. He was the one that we treated for cancer and sent him back.
right, we sent him back. And what you see here is that
That's what Gideon was talking about.
every 100th letter, it coincides. These, right? Ismail, Haniyeh, and Gaza coincide. So that being said, I just wanted to show you, this is the horrible conditions of Gaza. You're looking at the refugee camp of Gaza. Isn't it horrible?
It is now.
It is now, and but they're complaining that they live in such, honestly, it's Manhattan. The density is similar to that of Manhattan. Nobody calls Manhattan a refugee camp. So I finished about 10 minutes early to get some insight on what people were thinking about what they saw tonight, or anything that's bothering anyone. I tried to show you some good things that are happening in the world, like what happened in Germany, where non-Jews ceremoniously decided to show up and protect the Jews from the day of jihad. Also, the amazing sacrifice that our young people are making in the land of Israel. I'm not sure if you heard or if you saw it. I was going to share it maybe on my Friday morning email if I can get to it this week. A lot of Arabs work in the cleaning industry, and Hadassah Hospital in Hakerem, Saturday morning, 150 Arabs didn't show up to work, called in sick. And the word went out that the hospital was dirty and that the Arabs were not going to be coming to clean. And the next morning at 6 a.m., 150 B'nai Akiva students, kids, ages 14 to 18, 150 of them showed up and worked 12-hour shifts, cleaning the entire hospital from top to bottom. And the next morning, the school was canceled. They came back.
Wow.
So there weren't 150. There were 275. And now these teenagers are coordinating, not only cleaning the hospitals, but it dawned on them, all the clinics around Jerusalem. You know, like we have these emergency centers. They're all frequently cleaned by, Arabs. So sure enough, these kids, and they're doing it all themselves on WhatsApp. No parental supervision, all volunteers. These kids are, like 15 years old going on 30. They're amazing. Our Jewish kids are amazing. So just to give you an idea what's going on in Israel. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Any statements?
I was just going to mention about what happened with the hospital in Gaza that they claimed that they really bombed now. So you didn't
What
hear
happened?
about this, Rabbi?
I don't know. Tell me, and then I'll tell you if I
So
heard.
there was a hospital in Gaza that they claimed the 500 people were killed there, that the Israelis bombed it. It was just today in the afternoon, around 3 o'clock this afternoon. Well, Israel looked into it and they confirmed 100% that it was actually from Jihad, not even Hamas rocket that fell within their area. Yeah.
Misfire. About
I
25%
just
of
received-
their rockets misfire.
Sorry.
Yeah, about 25% of them fall in there, right?
Sorry, I just received a text from my niece, and it says from Farida Khan. I am Al Jazeera journalist Farida Khan, working in Khan Yunis, Gaza. I saw with my own eyes that it was Hamas Ayash 250 rockets. It was Hamas misfired rocket. Al Jazeera is lying. I have video of that Hamas missile landing in the hospital.
Wow.
Well, supposedly they sent a very long range one that was supposed to get to Haifa, and that's how the Israelis realized, because it was like hundreds that they sent at one time all over the country. A lot of them were around in the middle in Tel Aviv or Matkan, all this area, all the way to Netanya, Herzliya. And then the one that was supposed to come to Haifa kind of missed it, and that was probably the one that they were talking about. Anyway,
There was also a very important video that the EU spent $800 million upgrading the water system, the water systems in Gaza. There's this that now we found this video. Where do you think they're getting the 16-inch pipes for?
the pipes, yeah.
They're ripping up 8 years ago. 8 years ago, they ripped up the pipes, and that's hundreds of miles of piping. And that's what they're using for these rockets.
Yeah.
Right. And they said
They claim they don't have water, but 90% of the water is controlled by Hamas. It's only 10% of the water that's
What
controlled.
I would like to share this following idea with everyone. First of all, whatever you do, unless you're in a very controlled space, remember I warned you that this is being recorded. Unless you're in a very, very controlled space, be very, very careful of what you say about our enemies, because people are going to repeat it. And it's not, oh, did you hear what Rabbi Perlson said that we should do? No. People are going to repeat things like, you know what Jews say now? So be very, very careful. And if you remember, when I announced that we had successfully neutralized the terrorists on Shabbat, I made the announcement. I prefaced it with, Al tismach manipulat oivecha. We do not celebrate even when our enemies are neutralized. You're not allowed to, right, that's the first thing. And second thing is, every single one of us can be an advocate. If you have not followed my instructions on Shabbat and gone one click, and on me, I have like self-fill-in. I clicked on first name, and the whole thing fills in my first name, my last name, my address, and you push send, and like 7 minutes later, both our senators thanked me for it's through AIPAC. Both my senators, the White House, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, the governor's office. I mean, it took me literally, and I think on my last class, I showed you, it literally took me like 15 seconds. And like 7 or 8 of emails went out to our political leaders. Everyone can do that. Everyone can be an advocate. Everyone can, you don't have $1,000? Good, give $10. By the way, I highly recommend that you all give your donations through Israel Bonds. It seriously takes, I have it on my app. I just got Hadassah now signed up. Judy and I just made our donation to Hadassah. And it's really simple. And what happens is Israel Bonds, let's say, for example, you're going to give $1,000 to Hadassah. So Israel Bonds immediately gets $1,000. Within 30 seconds, Hadassah gets a notification that they now own a $1,000 bond. So you can say, oh, but they need the money now. What happens is, first of all, they save 4% because you're not charging your credit card. And then in 1 year, you know how much it's giving now? 6.12%. That means your $1,000 is really $1,100. But wait, there's more. If they need it right now, it's principal. They can borrow against it with preferred rates. Even if they only get 2.4%, they're still going to make a 4% profit, and they can borrow against it. And the fourth reason why you have to buy Israeli bonds is Israeli bonds is monitored through the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Committee. And every time a bond is bought, politically, people see that Israel is being supported. And all the politicians monitor this because it's a statement of how people support. And if people buy $1 billion worth of bonds this year, which is feasible, boy, is that a statement to political leaders. You know what? Here's another shocker. Judy and I frequently support certain politicians that we like. I got to find out if I can pay them with an Israeli bond. That would be every one of us has the potential to make a statement. Make a statement in everything we do. We've got to listen. 1,400 are dead, massacred. It's worse than you think. There's still over 240 in critical condition. And you know what critical condition means? They lost an arm, they lost a leg, they're blind. Wait, we still have, Israel now acknowledges 198 hostages. Okay, it's not over. And we haven't even gone into the Gaza yet. So it's only just beginning. And everything we do makes a difference. That's all I'm going to tell you. Everything you say makes a difference. Everything you say makes a difference in the public domain. Every dollar you give makes a difference. Every email you send makes a difference. Do your part. That's all. That's all we can do. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to address them now, or if you don't want to do it because we're recording, then hold on a second. I'm going to stop the recording.